Hi, Anand. Welcome to our podcast where we talk to cybersecurity voices about general trends and where the industry is moving. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I know we try to do this in person when you were in the Bay Area. We have to do it this way, but we'll definitely fix it next time when I'm
Yeah,
in Singapore.
definitely, definitely. And, the whole cybersecurity world is moving from one place to another. And I think this is one of these industries where you have to be present everywhere to make it work. And it's just such a pleasure to have you here and to learn more about cybersecurity from your perspective. So maybe just to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit more about your cybersecurity journey? How did you break into cybersecurity and end up as a field CISO?
Right. I mean, I'll be honest to it. It's I just somehow found it through many pivots. So I started my career as an engineer. I knew computers was the right way to do. And after my engineering, I went into a technology consulting company and realized I enjoyed more of the business side of it, not necessarily coding all my life. So I immediately decided within 2 years to get an MBA. And again, ended up back in technology because that's still a amazing space for you to explore. And I did a bunch of sales operations and business development roles early on in my career, and
Yeah.
I did end up with consulting, and that's where it opened my avenues to think about variety of projects I could be an asset for. So I always thought myself as a generalist, and that's how I always approach even today, like trying to have multiple projects going in different areas so that you are always aware of what's happening. And that trait somehow helped me find my next gig, and always ended up doing something new. I don't know why, how, but that just kept on repeating itself. I joined Silicon Valley Bank after a while and wanted to learn governance, risk, and compliance, and that's how I entered into cybersecurity. And I was there about 8 years, and that's where I really learned the trade. Did understand the big picture because I was the guy who was dealing with the regulatory exams and providing all kind of CISO program support and running the steering committee and dealing with all the audits. So it gave me a great perspective from a leader's perspective of all the moving parts in the program. Worked under four different CISOs there. Then eventually decided to do something on the industry side, on a business side. So I'm a different type of a CISO. You probably are familiar with the Field CISO concept. So I'm on a solution advisory team that does exclusive CISO type of advisory to our customers. I do some vCISO assessments and ransomware readiness kind of engagements, doing high-level tool strategy and helping them come up with the best practice and so on and so forth. So it's a very interesting role, more focused on helping other CISOs be a valuable asset to their companies and always augmenting their skills.
Wow, that's exciting. I think also, especially the field CISO role, it's something that came recently, and so many people don't quite understand what does it involve. So I just would love to understand better what does it involve. What does your everyday look like?
Sure. I mean, to start with, I definitely see this as more of a business role. So you need to understand, even from a CISO's perspective, things are changing drastically. They cannot only think about the technical aspects of it and how are they defending. They need to have a bigger picture on what is the business they are in and how can they effectively enable the business at the end of the day and sort of balance the two sides of the coin. So being a field CISO, that gives you the same visibility of what are the different trends out there, what are the things that we should really pitch to our customers, and at the same time make the entire cybersecurity ecosystem innovate faster. So we are working with all the OEM vendors. We are constantly putting them against each other for like sort of healthy competition and battle, so that the best solution wins. And we are the guys who are matchmakers, taking the best solutions and providing vendor agnostic advice to the customers. So essentially, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for many. Like they end up trying to partner with us and try to understand what the customers are really looking for through us. And we provide that feedback to the vendors to make better products. And it becomes a vital link into the entire cybersecurity life cycle of identifying the problems and trying to create better solutions.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. It sounds like it's a combination of business and technology at the same time. So not just purely focusing on the technology side. I think every vendor out there, whenever they're speaking prospect, what they realize is everyone wants to have solution that is as seamless as possible, because there can be multiple technological advantages. But if it takes ages to deploy it, then is there that much of a benefit of having it? So I just want to learn more. Like, if you went through similar struggles whenever trying to find relevant solution for whatever customer you are working with, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the practitioner shoes many years, and this is again a new role that I'm exploring. But the good thing about this role is you are not purely in a sales mode. You're trying to find the right solution for the customer. So I know, like, there's CISOs who have told me that you're just a glorified sales guy. So that's not. I strongly disagree with that. And of course, on the flip side, everybody should be selling themselves in whatever capacity they are. Even if they are a CISO, they are selling their technical skills internally. So what we provide to the table is more research focused on latest and greatest we are seeing from our vendors, which is straight out of the press. And we have our own lab environments where our technical architects are constantly testing the features and see which ones is performing better in terms of total output of vulnerabilities or the capabilities and suite available. So we are able to do that on their behalf and provide them a neutral point of view. If they want to play around the tool, they always tap into the value-added resellers and solution providers to sort of do their initial research, doing the proof of value and demos. And that's the kind of value that I bring in, and I'm constantly learning because of that. So my mind is always tapped into all the vendors, what they're up to. I have to go to the different conferences, learn what's the latest and greatest, and keep my priority. Like in my next conversation, I need to immediately prioritize. Okay, these are the things that we talked about in their last call, and how can I add better value? How can I find them something that I learned most recently from a latest speech or the latest press release from a product vendor, and I'm always in that mode of educating the customer. So I really love that part of it. Job.
That's exciting. It's so exciting to always stay on top of things, especially in such a fast-changing field. I'm just curious, what kind of research did you recently see that you thought is the most relevant and something that a lot of CISOs should focus on? Because there's so much noise in the industry. Sometimes it's so hard to pinpoint which one is most important. So just from your perspective, which one you find the most intriguing today?
Wow, that's a hard one. Why don't we stick to the company that you guys are part of? So I really enjoy following up with the latest and greatest in the endpoint security and how ultimately your employees are your most vulnerable resource, and it's hard to manage what they do and sort of having the right balance between productivity and security. So I started digging more into the enterprise browser space and browser isolation. And the more I started learning, it just dawned upon me that almost 90% of all the compromises or attacks begin one way or other through the endpoints, through the browser environments, or one of the credentials gets leaked. And that's how people eventually get in. It's a common sense finding, but we don't do enough about it. So I'm really tracking that space now, especially from an identity standpoint. I mean, browser is one example, but how can we make the identities or the attack surface around identity security more robust? And there's so many different approaches that have come up with non-human identities as another example, or
Yeah.
trying to apply a lot of context on what that identity is doing, and not necessarily just based on the identity or its access permissions, more about
Yeah.
what is the location, what are they trying to do. So there's a lot of context to be applied, and that's where I think AI is also going to differentiate all the products. Everybody has a solution around it, so hopefully we get to see some kind of like winners in that space who can solve identity for the
That
better.
is very true. That is very true. I think when it comes to browser security space, it still is an emerging field, and not many people understand what kind of threat a lot of people face while being on the browser. So I think it's one of these fields that still requires a lot of education to be brought in. What kind of attacks do people face on everyday basis, and why, let's say, endpoint and SaaS ACC are not capable of covering this. So it involves a lot of educating around that. I just also wanted to touch upon, you mentioned AI, right? And I feel like in every conversation, you cannot leave the room without speaking about it. So today, a lot of cybersecurity companies like to cover AI, but then when it comes to customers, a lot of people are afraid when it comes to data leakage. So what are your thoughts about it? Is it an enabler, or is it something that harms?
No, I think I mean that's that could be another podcast in itself. But the way I'm looking at it is, of course, you cannot ignore AI. Mean, it's the next multiplier of innovation in whatever context you want to see. It's going to be a business enabler rather than a security tool that we're talking about. So people are going to do that at any cost, because otherwise you go out of business. But when there's innovation happening around that, you want to have the security teams catch up with the pace of innovation and develop the right kind of frameworks. And it's again, it comes down to the people, process, technology. There's awesome technology out there in terms of like providing model MLSecOps pipelines and trying to have complete observability, visibility into the model itself, and trying to integrate that into the CI/CD pipelines. But in terms of the actual processes that needs to exist within the business side of it, people have to understand how to safely adopt the AI model into their existing business processes, what kind of controls they want to put in place. And it becomes a business conversation at that point in time. And we need more GRC type of tools that will help you manage the entire life cycle of that. But especially in terms of the DLP use case that you mentioned, where like people might just leak PII or sensitive IP information, that's definitely a top of the mind for many of the CISOs. Again, going back to the classic firewall mentality, you cannot just put a firewall before the LLM to solve the problem, right? You need to again understand the context of the question, and whether it's really a malicious attempt or an innocuous question at the LLM. And you need another LLM that is trained enough to fend off those. It's again AI versus AI, right? So most likely you're going to see another threat vector that's driven by an AI engine, and you want to have another AI fighting that effectively so that you're able to protect your workload.
Practically one LLM fighting another LLM, and it's like, which one is going to win?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this constantly evolves. I'm tracking some vendors. Don't want to throw in any specific names here, but I think it's not something that we've been working on only in the recent rise of OpenAI world. The predictive AI has existed for decades, right? So it's just a natural evolution when Gen AI became mainstream. So really, I think cybersecurity, I feel like that's one of the pioneers in using AI the right way to classify malicious attempts and trying to fend off attacks automatically. So that's going to be a continuous cycle of improvement.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful to have this JRC background because at one point or another, you have to understand like JRC to be able to pick the right vendor, to pick the right path to go. So whenever you procure a security solution or push a new initiative, what are some ways CISOs can get an internal buy-in smoothly?
Oh, yeah, that's going to be the money question. So obviously, the CISOs know what they want, but oftentimes where it falls flat is they're not able to make that problem everybody's problem. So I always start with that. Always start with the business goals of why certain projects exist and how are you going to get the budget against all those other projects, right? So money is again a rare commodity. You want to be able to show them that whatever new shiny tool or project you're executing is has a multifold effect on protecting the business revenues or the customer trust and so on and so forth. That's where I think majority of the conversations fall flat. And of course, once you have hit that ROI part, you can layer multiple drivers and have more allies within your conversation, make it a compliance conversation. That's always having more traction from the board and the leadership than making it something more proactive. So I've always found success when you make that compliance plus cybersecurity initiative. Same way, you want to have allies from sales organizations who are voicing your concerns that if we don't do this, we're going to lose customers. It's going to impact your trust. Those are some of the ways that I've approached it. And nowadays, there's a lot of data available for you to quantify that. So you take a look at Verizon's data breach report. It breaks down what is the cost of a data breach and what is the probability that you're going to get hit. And you can always use that as your ammunition to fund your projects.
I mean, it's very true because some people hesitate to purchase a certain product, but then the cost of mitigating that is so much higher. And then it's not only the actual cost as much as the harm that it brings to reputation and the brand image of certain company. And this is just something absolutely invaluable, something that I think a lot of people don't realize how much risk it possesses. So whenever there is this high-level conversation with the boardroom, I feel like CISOs always struggle to push in a way initiative because it is still a preventive measure. And I feel like there is not always this understanding in the boardroom.
No, I absolutely. I think the board is actually getting more and more concerned about cybersecurity thanks to all the emerging regulations, at least in the US with SEC coming in with their own recommendations of disclosure. That's going to be a major driver in the next couple of years. Of course, the board is going to expect at least one or two people who can be cyber savvy. And that opens doors for many of the CISOs who have been stuck in the technical role and they want to explore other career paths as a board of director. A lot of good progress in terms of governance that I'm seeing. I believe people complain about all these costs cannot be justified. All these tools are exorbitant for what they do. At the same time, when you think about it, cybersecurity is all about protecting your customer information, protecting your revenues at the end of the day. And it should always be thought of as a percentage of the revenue. What are you willing to give up? If you're a startup, of course, no vendor is going to sell you like a 200K CrowdStrike deal just to protect whatever your small startup team is doing. But as you grow, as the revenues come in, you see value in these products, and the products are priced based on that, right? It doesn't have any intrinsic value. They can sell the same product for a 10K for a customer and charge $1 million for another customer, which is whose scale is much bigger in terms of their revenue, right? So I think you will always find your sweet spot, what whatever price point you're comfortable with. It should never be a cost conversation. It's more about whether the board understands the importance of that spend.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so essential to be this, in a way, translator between the two, between the tech side and vendor side, more from the company and the vendor side, because sometimes there is a bit of a miscommunication, and having this third party that is able to negotiate in a way is always helpful. I'm curious, what kind of industries do you see to be the most open to adaptation? And I know a lot of conversations are driven by money, driven by budgets, but whenever we are not talking about the budgets, even though it is one of the biggest variables, which industries do you see being the most open-minded when it comes to emerging fields in cybersecurity? Because browser security, just as an example, it's not something everyone is aware of. And even though a lot of CISOs like to say, I like to stay on top of events, it still takes time to get educated about threats, about how do you just go about convincing people. It does involve a certain pressure.
No, I mean, first of all, I wanted to comment that you guys are doing something amazing, and you're creating a new category. You don't come across a new categories getting created very often, right? So that kudos for the team for doing that. And of course, whenever that's happening, it's you don't have a playbook that you can take it to your customers, right? So the customers think in a more traditional landscape. They have a SOC team. They have a product to defend their network. They have a product to defend their endpoint, and they might think, okay, browser is part of your endpoint story. So we already have a CrowdStrike, so why bother? Yep. But then, irrespective of having an EDR, you see like breaches happening left, right, center. Your endpoint detection and response traditionally has always been, again, pretty much based on AI or pattern matching or some kind of a probabilistic model, right? And there's a lot of like innovation happening now in terms of isolating the malware completely in a different container solution. And I first came across this browser isolation as a concept through Zscaler, and we used them in the past, and it made perfect sense. I didn't understand why it wasn't a thing so far, but I knew that it's gonna take off in some fashion. And now you like fast forward like a couple of years down the lane, like you have so many choices of enterprise browsers and browser isolation or thin OS, and they all have their own nuances, right? There's not one particular technology that prevails everywhere. There are companies, especially manufacturing industry, where they have a lot of IoT devices, endpoints, iPad, their contract workers end up using. There's a need for having a hardened OS with limited functionality that they can use within their iPad or laptop. That's one extreme use case where you want to lock it down to the minimum things you can do. But for your typical users like you and me, knowledge workers, they don't want to have a different experience from their day-to-day personal laptop experience. They want to access the same sites. They want to do work and like personal life has just merged into one. Like you just cannot have two different things. You're working wherever you are, right? So that's the space I think I'm very passionate about, like trying to make that seamless. You want to have some kind of a agent that is always protecting you, but you don't feel that, right? It's taking care of things for you. That's the hardest problem to solve, in a sense.
Yeah. It's all about making the experience seamless in a way that, does my tech team has to struggle to enable a certain product? How's the user experience? Because when we talk about browser isolation, it's not like you can isolate every activity, and it's not necessary to isolate every activity because there are so many ways how you can go about solving a certain cybersecurity problem without browser isolation. So it's all about being able to be agile enough to give a solution that the customer really wants and needs. I'm just curious, how do you see browser threatscape evolving over the next year?
The browser threats have always been one of the favorite vectors for majority of the who I call as the script kiddies, right? So if you're a budding hacker, you just go and figure out, okay, this seems interesting, and I'm just gonna create like a malicious plugin. Somebody might just download it, and I'm just gonna deliver my payload. That happens all the time. Google reported like every year there's millions, maybe like 2 or 3 million new spoofing sites being set up, right? And they all are there for that one purpose, right? You go to a malicious URL, you download a payload, right? And browser security is not just about, again, looking for these patterns, because obviously when you do a probabilistic model, you're going to mess up. You can have an amazing AI. Of course, folks like Darktrace have amazing stuff in AI, even like a decade before we started talking about AI. But even then, it's a probabilistic model. Of course, you need both. Without applying AI, you cannot solve for every possible scenario. You want to. There's been cases where like AI can detect with much better accuracy than one of your advanced SOC analysts or any other method you have. So you want to have, as part of your layers of defense, AI would be one of the layer of defense, but wherever it makes sense, why even go that far? You just stop the malicious payload in a different environment, right? So you don't let it enter your endpoint. So I think one of the threat vectors, again, if we can somehow achieve that isolation, people are going to look for other ways to attack your enterprise, right? So the whole concept of browser-based malicious delivery might just go away, but that doesn't mean you've solved all kinds of compromises. I still keep worrying about credential leakage or just identity-based vector, because we're still using passwords. That's another thing that I see is evolving. Like you want to be passwordless. The passwords have proliferated to an extent where like a typical organization has, even though there's employees count might be like 1,000 plus, they have probably 10 times the identities because of all the different SaaS environments, the cloud, the non-identities they have set up, and identities that they have to create between AD accounts on-prem and cloud. So it just goes out of control, and there's no way having an IAM program or somebody just doing a certification. Ultimately, you just need one compromised credential. Somebody used a weak password, it ends up in dark web, and people can buy those for a dime a dozen. So the few areas where I'm really paying attention is like passwordless and endpoint security. I feel like endpoint security beyond what you're talking about from a browser standpoint. So there's lots to be done. The whole aspect of XDR, how are you triaging across all the different signals you're picking up, and that's an exciting space.
Yeah, I think you touched upon so many great points, and it's very true that an enterprise has to win every time, but an attacker just needs to win one time to steal these credentials. And one of very popular use cases that we see out there is even whenever an enterprise, let's say, enforces strong passwords, let's say an employee likes to use the same password for his personal Gmail as for company Gmail. And if personal gets compromised, an organization cannot really enforce on the personal side to make something stronger. So it's always a question, how do we protect ourselves without at the same time getting into a personal life? Because right now it's so interlinked with all the hybrid work out there. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts whenever it comes to hybrid work, right? As you said, like right now there are practically no boundaries, and you just want to be everywhere doing anything, but at the same time staying secure. How do you think hybrid work influenced cybersecurity field?
I have to respond with the comment you made about attackers have to be right only once. I think that needs to be addressed immediately, because it's not at all true, right? Yes, they may be able to get a compromised password. And just because they were able to successfully get that, they should not be able to compromise your entire network or your data. And if company was that vulnerable, you got to fire that CISO, right? So the whole concept of defense in depth has evolved, because you have to assume breach. You have to know that the inevitable is going to happen. but it's almost like your crown jewels are behind 5 or 6 different layers of defense. Or think about the football analogy, right? You're not completely blindsided by somebody approaching your goalpost. You have strategies to defend that, and when that person gets to a specific zone, you can deploy other means to defend, right? I think that's the right approach. So I read about all these compromises happening, and the APTs are lurking in your network for days. Like it's about like 280 days before you actually discover a breach. They are there figuring out how to laterally move into another environment and eventually get to your data. So as long as you have the right kind of defenses, you can stop them somewhere midway, or have other tripwires that these attackers can actually set alarms, and you can eventually protect your environment. So I just wanted to clarify that, it's not like CISOs are in a very unfair situation where they're going to lose all the time.
It's all about the layered approach.
All the companies have realized that this is going to be the norm, and that's why like Gartner also started talking about the whole SASE architecture, and how everything is going to be in the cloud. And it's not for everyone, honestly, depending on your journey, how many of your end workers are always connecting from public Wi-Fi. All those come into the play, and what kind of access they should be allowed if they were to connect from an insecure Wi-Fi. All those ultimately it becomes like a complex management problem. You have products available today, but oftentimes issues exist in terms of not having the right policies, not enforcing it strictly. Obviously, the concerns are like you don't want to stifle the pace of innovation or make the experience very full of friction and counterproductive, right? So I think it's a balance in that sense. You can definitely enable certain BYOD policies to support workforce which is always on the move, and you can do that with a very good CASB or a SASE solution. But if you're completely on-prem today, at least you want to be thinking about it. You want to have a roadmap for that, and because that's going to be the future. So there's no way around it.
Yeah, and I think those are all great points. I just have some more questions in closing to get your perspective. There are right now so many people looking to enter cybersecurity field. But when it comes from more senior position standpoint, what advice would you give to CISOs looking to groom and grow the team members as future leaders?
That's a question I'm very passionate about. Obviously, I'm a believer in mentoring and trying to enable your teams to achieve whatever their goals are. And not everybody has this has the same kind of aspirations. So you want to really understand one-on-one what is their development goals and what they really see. And depending on that, if somebody is inclined towards a very technical track, there's a lot of amazing free courses nowadays. I don't even have to there's hundreds of resources available from the vendors. There's SANS and IANS that provides more quality material and tracks for them to pursue. I think companies should definitely invest. Those are really expensive. I'm not discounting that, but the company should, the CISO should fight for the training. And those are some of the ways you can also motivate your employees and ensure retention. And think about some of the roles in cybersecurity are very stressful and monotonous. Being a SOC analyst, I've never been one, but I can empathize thinking through how the day goes. So I'm glad AI is taking over some of those thankless day-to-day routines. And we still haven't solved the SOC automation piece. Those are the areas where you can really free up some monotonous work so that your teams can think about more strategic ways to enable your business. So I think, from a training standpoint, I would definitely encourage that. Even otherwise, helping them attend conferences, being in the network, and learning from peers. I should have gotten that advice early on in my career as well, to be part of some working groups, providing some of your time for volunteering and other projects outside of your day-to-day 9-to-5 job. So I'm a firm believer, maybe not something that I've followed through from my college days, But now I would recommend everybody to have a mindset of, there's a classic saying, your 9 to 5 will pay your bills, but your 5 to 9, whatever you're doing, can change your life. So always have that philosophy, do more than what you do in your day job.
That's exciting. I think you literally just stole the words out of my mouth by saying like what kind of advice you wished you received when you just started your career. And yeah, as you mentioned, you just have to change that mindset from 9 to 5 and think what is happening beyond that. How do you, how to say, distinguish yourself? Because right now everyone is getting education, everyone is getting extra certificates, but it's all about how do you stand out. And I think also being able to be people's person is so important, because at the end of the day, it's also about translating difficult concepts into the boardroom, into business cases. So it's also quite essential. One of the things that we like to do with our guests is previous guests typically ask our next guest a question. So I have this question for you, Anand. Our guest asked, what one thing or person has been the biggest influence in your life? So it doesn't have to be just related to career, it can be in general as well.
Okay. Again, I have several mentors, so I cannot say one person as somebody who continuously stayed in touch with. But I value all the mentorship I've received along my career journey, and it's successfully helped me in find my next pivot. But the one thing that's kind of stayed continuously through my career is always seeking for learning new things. So it's not about cybersecurity. When we started the podcast, I mentioned that I just somehow ended up with cybersecurity, and that's just me. That there may be others who grew up dreaming about what they want to do when they were just 5 years old. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm constantly chasing something new and learning something and being like a jack of all trades. And beyond cybersecurity, I enjoy doing several other things. I travel the world. I've been to like 45 plus countries now, and want to experience cultures, foods. So that's how I keep things fresh, I guess. And eventually, you only have one life. So try to do something new every day. Challenge yourself and find a purpose. You can do many things, but without a purpose, end of the day, when you look back, it doesn't feel fulfilling.
Yeah, advice from Anand: never stop, keep on going forward. So what one question would you ask our next guest?
Okay, so let me put it this way. So there's a saying that diamonds are forged under one of the extreme pressures, and that's how like personalities are made, right? So for the next guest, I would pose this: like, what was the most pressure that you had to handle in any kind of crisis, maybe personal, ideally within your cybersecurity career, and how did you overcome that? That would be a valuable lesson for others who are probably going to go through the same journey.
Yeah, it's an amazing question. Thank you so much, Anand, for joining us for our Community Voices podcast. It was so much fun. I think our listeners have so much to learn from you about how to navigate the environment in boardroom, how to be a field CISO, and so many other things. I just can't stop counting. And thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I'll keep my promise. I definitely want to meet the team when I'm in Singapore. Until then, thank you for the opportunity, and we'll talk soon.
We'd love to have you.